accountant and banker. He is coming here tonight as an individual citizen, concerned citizen.
Thanks very much, Dermot, and good evening to you all. That is a kind introduction, and I'd like to just say that thank you for inviting me as an interested person who has been in the debate since 2007, actually, since before the crash, and then more noticeably since the crash. Doing my best, like everybody else here, to see if we can add to the knowledge and add to the range of possible solutions to the very hard place where we find ourselves. First of all, I want to make it very clear that I fully support the honest endeavours and every effort being made by Artesia and the government in their quest to try and find a solution. And I'm not saying this in any soft, limp way. I mean it from the heart. But I come from a background and an experience, a battlefield of business and finance that has helped me to see clearly some of the facts and make the analyses that would insist that we go and raise the tone, raise the strength, raise the imperative of getting a proper restructuring of the debts across this country. And it's not just the debts that are called loosely the bank debts. A paper was written in August 2011 by Coscetti, Mohanty, Zampoli, leading economists with the Bank of International Settlements, looking at the effect of debt on the real economies across 18 OECD economies. It didn't include Ireland, maybe because of the size of our economy. It was a review of the years 1980 up to 2008. That's a 30-year approximate spread. And it looked at countries, the types of debt, not just sovereign debt, but household debt and business debt, non-financial corporate debt. That's the debt that businesses take on in order to do business. And it compared each of those three elements of debt to the national incomes, the GDPs of these 18 countries. And where individually one of those components, say household debt, rose above 90%, to use an analogy, the needle on the dashboard goes into red, and it puts strain on the economy of that country. Likewise, if non-financial corporate debt, that's the debt that businesses owe, as a proportion of the GDP of that country goes above 90%, again, the needle goes into red. And lastly, when sovereign debt or national debt goes into the 90% and over region, the growth in an economy is stifled. Now, in order to get a better explanation, we all had a feeling that the debt, the national or sovereign debt of this country, because of the programme that had been entered into in 2010, November 2010, we all had a very good idea that there was going to be massive strain, and would it be bearable or supportable as the debt as a proportion of GDP or national income. And in the case of this country, national income and GDP have the sort of the hiatus between the indigenous economies, which is the GNP, and the GDP, which includes the production of goods and services by the foreign invested companies into this country. By superimposing where Ireland would have stood in the table of the 18 countries, there was the shocking and alarming fact that on the combination of the three elements of debt, we would have been at approaching 450% of national income. That was a simple financial, mathematical proof that the burden of debt across the economy, made up of those three elements, was going to lead us into a long, drawn-out economic purgatory. And that's where we are. Now, you know, it's funny, it struck me today that while the powerful, the financially powerful, the politically powerful, the intellectually powerful people of the world gather in Davos in Switzerland, here in the parish of Ballyhea, Charleville, you good people are trying to get a better view of where we are and where we might go. And I think we'd all agree, and I mean this again, and it's not trying to be just saying the right thing to be the best boy in the class. We need to get behind our Taoiseach and our Minister for Finance. I see people nodding, and I'll tell you why. Because they, remember, take their advice from the civil servants, the professional advisors, the people who are paying big fees, to get a view and to try and understand what's going on. And sometimes those advices fall short of where they should be. And therefore, there may not be the courage needed to bring the case more strongly. I look at some people who consistently, from the outside, have said that the imposition, as Declan Ganley said, of the loan losses converting into national debt through the IBRC Pro-Note programme and also the other loan advances to the remainder banks, the survivor banks, under the ELA programme. Those levels of debt are just too much, and they derive from an origin that the outside commentators like Joseph Stiglitz, Sharon Bowles, an English lady, one of the most influential ladies in Europe, she heads up the Finance and Economics Committee of the EU, Jeffrey Sachs, John Malden, outsiders who have looked into, from an outside perspective, where the origin of some of the components of debt in this economy arose. And to a person, they agree that it was unconscionable is one word, immoral another word, and all those things. And we've got to keep repeating until the euro drops with the people at the ECB and in the European Commission, that whatever the rules that obtain to date and the articles of setting up the ECB that apply, maybe our case shows that there's a new situation that has to be addressed radically by radical changes to the rules, because my belief is that there are other pockets of dangerous financial, unrecoverable assets across the balance sheets of the banks of Europe. Banking union is the next step in trying to solve the problem of the Eurozone crisis. It's moving, I think, too slow to catch up with what is practically happening. We had last week 2 visitors to the Finance Committee in the Oireachtas. We had Governor Patrick Honohan. These are public meetings. Some of you may have watched the hearings and the questionings. And in that one, the sort of interrelationship of the 2 cogs in our economy, in our financial economy, which is the households and the businesses that are finding the legacy debts that were wrapped up during the boom for assets that have disappeared and are valueless, and that the repayments on which loans are more than are too straining and impossible to repay, and that need to be written down and recalibrated. And the banks have so far been paralysed and slow and haven't actually started the programme of restructuring and rearranging those loans to repayable amounts by their customers. Question, why? Maybe the recapitalisation of July 2011 fell short of what was needed. And that's the question that's being asked by some of the outside agencies. It's a good question. Coupled with that question is, are the provisions in the survivor banks, the loan loss provisions against their current gross loan amounts on their balance sheets, are they sufficient? The question is begged again, is there enough capital? But if more capital is needed, then it means the survivor banks will have to look to the source of creditor participation, and that is the Euro system that lent, our central bank lent into these banks ELA, exceptional liquidity assistance, and the ECB has also lent, secured on financial assets. But these are all the questions that need to be asked by the technical people. I suppose I feel that I must keep reminding those people charged with the duty of negotiation to strengthen the voice, strengthen the case, produce the figures. We had also in the Oireachtas last week John Corrigan of the NTMA, where he explained how the last loan issue was raised at lower interest rates and low yields. But, you know, in the European markets, and this isn't really so easily understood, at the moment across the world, the financial markets are being pumped with cash, which reduces the yields, which creates actually the possibility of another bubble, this time a bond bubble or a financial assets bubble. And the leaders of Europe and the leaders of the ECB have a duty and a responsibility to look hard, truthfully, at the financial situation, the balance sheets across the major banks, and to make the necessary provisions. Because Ireland's experience, and we were strong-armed into the unfair loading of these losses in excess of 60 billion onto the people of Ireland. And that needs to be corrected, and it needs to be corrected fast. And as I said to Patrick Honohan when he visited us last week, the only really financially and morally acceptable situation would be if there's to be a lengthening of the maturity of the bond and a repricing of the interest rates. The only really fair way would be in perpetuity extension at a zero interest rate, which technically is a writing down or writing off of the loans. Now that will probably need to be done across a number of other banks in other countries, in Spain, in Italy, maybe even, dare I say it, in Germany. But if that's what's required, that's what's required. And it could be a very big bill, one to be mutualised within the spirit of the original spirit of the EU, which was closer unity. And in that regard, it isn't encouraging to see Mr. Blair or Mr. Cameron you know, thinking off in a different direction. Men like Helmut Kohl and Jacques Delors, they knew what it was in their own lifetime to see Europe unravel through bad political leadership prior to World War II into World War II. 85 million people died in the 1939 to 45 era across Europe and across Asia and Central Europe. Any over-selfish thinking, politically or financially, is the beginning of a path to that sort of problem and ultimate demise. It should be stopped straight away. And the way to do it is closer unity, financially and politically, through democratic means, in a way that any problems that arise are honestly solved in a mutual way, which means where there has to be transfers of resources from the weak, from the strong to the weak, so be it. And that's what's needed in the solution to our problem. In principle, It can be done soon, very soon. It can be done in days. And to have had, you know, technical papers being written for the last 18 months, leading to what was announced on the news only 4 hours ago, that there's a disappointment that the preferred avenue on the solution to the Brono thing has fallen on deaf ears in the ECB. But you know what? It's time now to go knocking louder on their door and arriving at Frankfurt and making the case one page simple, and to get their attention by whatever means. And I don't mean unseemly means. There's always a way to get attention from your creditors, and that is to say, we have a problem, and we want to actually have a meeting before we come to a payment date. And I see the signals for me to wind up. I just want to make sure that I haven't forgotten something. All I'd ask you, though, is to speak as logically and as persuasively as you can, to make the points, and to actually insist that the leadership, rather than protest at the leadership, proactively support and encourage, and tell them not to be afraid, to go for it. That's what I'm doing, and I'm confident that it will. I'm confident that it will. Because if we pause on the 31st of March, we'd have their undivided attention. Thank you very much.